Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly fascinating text. We're taking a deep dive into the second epistle of Peter, specifically chapter 1, verses 3 through 15. But listen, I want to be super clear right from the jump. This isn't just an analysis of what it means to adopt a few new religious habits or, just attend church for a really long time. The text we're exploring today challenges us to think about the transformation of the entire human personality. It argues for a total inside-out overhaul, taking believers from being mere spectators to active participants in what the text actually calls the divine nature. It's deep, it's challenging, and it's absolutely crucial for today. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We've got 6 key areas to cover today: the modern spiritual contradiction, participating in divine nature, the root of stagnation, the ladder of growth, healing the whole person, and finally, the call to authenticity.
Section 1. The modern spiritual contradiction.
Now, to really understand this contradiction, we've got to look back at the original audience. When the Apostle Peter wrote his second letter, knowing his martyrdom was literally right around the corner, the early church was battling false teachers. These were guys who proudly claimed to possess secret spiritual knowledge, yet they were living lives completely filled with greed and arrogance. And you know what? We see that exact same jarring contrast today. On one hand, you have folks with incredibly deep Bible knowledge, or people who are super active in ministry. On paper, they look fantastic. But on the other hand, their internal reality is completely toxic. You have individuals whose words just cut like knives, or who exhibit highly controlling behavior. Outwardly, they look perfectly faithful singing on a Sunday morning, but inwardly, or say in Monday morning road rage, they are just filled with fear, insecurity, anger, and self-hatred. It's a total disconnect between the head and the heart.
And honestly, this disconnect so often manifests as pride, which totally distracts from the actual core message of the faith. Take the historical example of denominational pride over Bible translations. Back in 1604, King James I commissioned a translation to try and unify a very divided England, which gave us the 1611 King James Version. It's a beautiful, majestic text. But historically speaking, those translators had access to a relatively limited collection of Greek manuscripts. Fast forward to the modern era, and scholars have uncovered thousands of older, arguably more reliable manuscripts, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Codex Sinaiticus. Yet, to this day, some people will aggressively argue that only their preferred translation is spiritual. They are completely missing the point. Is our faith supposed to be in a specific English translation or in the person of Jesus Christ?
Which leads us to a genuinely provocative question. Really think about this for a second. Why do people stay in church for decades, yet somehow become colder instead of warmer? Why do some Christians become harsher instead of gentler? Well, it happens because people often develop just one tiny slice of their spirituality, like their intellect, or maybe their flawless attendance record, while leaving their mind, their emotions, and their actual relationships completely untouched.
Section 2. Participating in divine nature.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core solution found in verses 3 and 4. Peter states that God's divine power has already given believers absolutely everything they need for life and godliness. Not just a little bit of strength to get by, but everything required to endure suffering, to love incredibly difficult people, and to live holy lives. So the problem isn't a lack of resources, it's a total failure to use them. It is exactly like someone starving to death while literally sitting on a massive, overflowing bank vault simply because they refuse to open it and access what already belongs to them. The heavenly resources have already been deposited. Our job is to actually use them so we can participate in the divine nature. This whole idea is deeply connected to what's known as the imago Dei. That's the broken image of God within us. A super common misunderstanding is that the gospel is just, a ticket to heaven after you die. But that is incredibly limiting. According to this text, the true goal of the gospel is the continual transformation and restoration of that imago Dei right now in the present world. It means your anger is actively turning into love, your pride is becoming humility, your addiction is being replaced by holiness. It's about changing your entire being, not just your final destination.
Section 3. The root of stagnation. So the crucial point is, if all this power is available, why aren't people changing? We really have to analyze why someone can hear sermons week after week, sing the songs every Sunday, and yet still worship empty-handed, constantly explode in anger, and leave a trail of broken relationships. Why the stagnation? Well, many people treat salvation as a finish line. They crossed it, they're saved, and now they just sit down. And when that happens, they go to church, sure, but they don't grow. When believers forget the absolute wonder of grace in the cross, they inevitably become cold and arrogant. We have to view salvation as the starting point. It's the crack of the starting pistol for a lifelong marathon of transformation.
Peter actually delivers a pretty stark warning about this in chapter 1, verse 9. He says, "Whoever does not have these qualities is nearsighted and blind." And listen, this spiritual blindness is a devastating condition. It's exactly what causes longtime churchgoers to obsess entirely over their religious reputation, keeping up appearances and protecting their image rather than diving into the true, messy work of inner transformation. They have eyes, but they are completely blind to what actually matters.
Section 4, the ladder of growth. So how do we cure this blindness? Peter gives a very specific command: to make every effort. While salvation is definitely described as being by grace alone, spiritual maturity, that does not happen by accident. Think of a farmer. A farmer cannot magically conjure a seed out of thin air, but that farmer absolutely must cultivate the field, water the dirt, and pull out the weeds. Spiritual maturity requires intentional cultivation, and Peter lays out this amazing 8-step ladder to do just that. It starts right at the foundation with faith, and we're not just talking about nodding your head, but actual trusting surrender. From there, it builds to goodness, which is making your faith visibly attractive through everyday kindness and integrity. Then comes knowledge. But remember, knowledge without humility is just a dangerous weapon. Next is self-control, which is applying that truth to suppress our selfish desires, and that naturally leads into perseverance, the grit to keep walking when life gets painfully hard. This builds to godliness, which is having a reverence for God on a random Tuesday, not just on Sunday morning. Then brotherly affection, where we actually carry each other's burdens in community. And finally, the whole ladder climaxes at love. And this isn't just some sweet, fuzzy emotion. It is hard, sacrificial forgiveness.
Let's move to section 5, healing the whole person, and see how this builds.
Now, the theology of that ladder is meant to be applied directly to the messy reality of our daily lives. This breaks down into 5 key areas where authentic faith has to heal the whole person. The first area? Healing our self-image. So many people secretly despise themselves, constantly comparing their behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's highlight reel. But consider this profound declaration. The cross is God's declaration of your worth. The argument here is simple but powerful. Believers need to stop their emotional self-abuse because God gave His only Son for them. Truly accepting that immense value is step 1 to whole person healing.
Moving on to the second area, we have healing emotions. We all know that suppressed emotions inevitably explode. In fact, one of the most dangerous people you can have in a community is someone who is deeply wounded but constantly pretending to be totally fine, because wounds that are never healed inevitably end up wounding others. The text reminds us that the biblical Psalms are absolutely packed with honest fear, fierce anger, and deep grief. God isn't looking for a fake smile. He welcomes your tears and your raw honesty.
Area 3 is maturing minds. In our modern digital age, it is so easy to just consume endless podcasts, sermons, and YouTube videos in a matter of seconds. But that kind of fast consumption often just builds pride. It just arms us with theological ammunition to fire at other people. Deep reflection on the text, however, really sitting with it, actually digests that knowledge into personal transformation. And that is what produces genuine humility.
Area 4 is restoring community. Look, it's easy to avoid people, especially if you've been burned by a church in the past. But digital spirituality simply cannot replace real flesh and blood community. Why? Because conflict is actually God's training ground. We only learn how to truly forgive, how to serve, and how to develop patience through the inevitable, annoying friction of dealing with other imperfect people. True love just cannot develop in total isolation.
Finally, the 5th area is centering our spiritual life on God. This is about reordering the daily grind. Passion without Scripture easily becomes extreme and unbalanced. And doing ministry without a foundation of prayer, that quickly just becomes a prideful exercise in ego. True spirituality isn't chasing an emotional high. It is the quiet, consistent, daily rhythm of walking with God.
Section 6, the call to authenticity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the critical distinction it highlights. The ultimate summary of Peter's message here is that God is not looking for people who merely carry a long-time church attendance record. God desires men and women who carry the peaceful fragrance of Christ. The world is waiting for authentic Christians, not religious consumers. Think about it. A consumer sits back, critiques the music, and demands to be fed. But an authentic participant actually climbs that ladder of growth. The text gives us this incredible promise. Those who make every effort to grow in these qualities will not stumble. Instead, they will enter the eternal kingdom with absolute confidence and joy.
Which leaves us with this final, piercing question, derived directly from the text. Will you remain a consumer, or will you take the actual steps to participate in the divine nature? It's a serious challenge for all of us to evaluate the true internal state of our own spiritual authenticity. Are we just keeping up outward habits, or are we truly, deeply being transformed? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive leaves you curious, challenged, and eager to keep learning.